pulled us all apart from each other.
My name's Brooke Peak, and I work at the law firm of Butler, Wooten and Peak. Our firm and partners wanted to try to do what we could early on when the pandemic started last March to send a few meals to healthcare workers. We realized the need was greater, so decided to start a nonprofit, BWP Cares. We have delivered over 26,000 meals to healthcare workers.
She was partnering with local restaurants, small independent restaurants in the Columbus area to just bless the healthcare workers with food while they were working, long shifts.
And what better way to show that you love somebody that you never met than to feed them? A shelter-in-place order has closed businesses forever. And she, through her fundraising, and ordering of food, has been able to keep restaurants going.
We were actually considering the possibility of shutting down until the shelter-in-place was over, and she, stepping in and supporting us through the catering business that we were able to do through BWP Cares, actually helped us to keep our doors open during that time.
We've been in business since 1944, and during this unprecedented time, it really has been a blessing to partner with BWP and just being able to be a blessing to everyone, and also with a blessing being back to us as being business owners to help us strive.
It's just a beautiful picture of this community that she, I think, has cultivated in a very, very special way.
Back in March, we had to close our doors. We knew we needed to do something to keep our employees working. But also, Columbus Piedmont Regional came to us and asked, is there any opportunity that we could work alongside them and offer childcare to their employees? Because they were having problems with employees calling out or trying to figure out what they were going to do for childcare. During that time, we served about 150 youth between all our 3 locations. We were able to offer, knowing that the school year was coming back up, virtual learning programs. We are resilient. Just to see our teams come together and really work together in a way that I've never seen before, people stepping up, it makes me hopeful. More outreach opportunity to the communities that are underserved right now.
Hello, and welcome to Leveraging Community Resources, a conversation not only about our ability to mitigate the impact of COVID, but also about looking forward into the future and our resiliency in community and how we're able to lean on each other and share our resources. I think 2020 was a year that we never expected, and it shed a lot of light on our ability to be able to respond in ways that we had not done before. And just like with BWP Cares, our ability to come together and have an impact that was created, that was it kind of spread out and networked out into our community. And so I'd like to learn from that today, to examine how businesses and organizations and individuals in our community have been able to respond, and how we might respond in the future based on what we've learned in a way that is better and more focused than we might have without the last year under our belt. One thing about COVID is we don't live in a bubble, and now we see that more than ever. And so I hope today, I expect to learn from the leaders in our community who are joining us to share what they've learned. And I hope that you will too. As we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items. We want to keep these discussions positive and forward focused, and so I would ask you to please keep that in mind with your comments and your questions during this discussion. You do have access to both the chat functionality and the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you need help or just want to share something, feel free to type that into the chat box. If you have a specific question for one of our panelists, please use the Q&A panel for that, and we will get to those questions as time allows during that panel discussion today. The webinar itself will be an hour and a half long, and we will allow some time for additional virtual networking following the event. So if you would like to speak with our panelists one-on-one, in small groups, or ask a question that you were not able to get answered during the event, please do plan to take advantage of that. And I will tell you more about how that will work at the end of our panel discussion today. I have the great privilege of introducing to you Benjamin Blair. I have great respect for Ben. He has been a part of our steering committee with Hiring While Doing Good since 2019. He is the director of the Butler Center for Economic Research and the holder of the Sarah Turner Butler Endowed Chair at Columbus State University. He is also the professor of economics there in his 10th year. And prior to joining the Turner College of Business, Ben had a successful career in teaching and research at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and at Mississippi State University. Please help me today as we welcome Ben, and he shares with us how COVID and this outbreak has been and continues to impact our economy here in Columbus. Welcome, Ben.
We're serving up a 4-course meal for you today. We'll start by discussing some measures of poverty, and then we'll look at some of the official statistics for our region. And then second, we'll look at the data regarding local wages by occupation and derive some other poverty measures that are specifically for our local area. And I think that looking at the extent of poverty in our area is important because these are the people and the occupations who are impacted most by large disruptions in our economy, such as the pandemic. And after that, we'll look at some of the data on how the pandemic has affected employment in some of the different sectors in the economy. And finally, we'll look at some of the changes that nationally the businesses are making in the way they operate as a result of the pandemic. And these will be some long-term changes that are taking effect. And we'll talk more about that at the end. Before we get started, though, as an amuse-bouche to your lunch, I'm going to ask Kristen to open up a quick doodle poll for you to answer about how your business has recovered from the pandemic so far. Are you doing better than, about the same, or worse than you were prior to COVID? We've set the timer for 30 seconds, after which we'll take a look at the results. So if you'll answer those now. All right, and here's the results. It looks like over half of you are doing about the same prior to COVID. That's good news. And actually, wow, a third of you are doing better than you were prior to COVID. That's great news. Maybe we'll talk about more as we break out, and later on in the session, we'll talk about why you think you're doing better than you were prior to COVID. What's going on that's allowing you to do better, and then about those 10% of why they think they're doing actually worse than they were prior to COVID. All right, very good. We'll continue now if Kristen will remove the poll. There you go. Thank you. All right, so we're going to begin by looking at some poverty definitions. If I can get my slide to change. There we go. The official poverty measure is provided by the Census Bureau. Is based on the amount of income necessary to maintain a minimum food diet. It's a very old measure. It was developed back in 1963, but each year it's adjusted for inflation, and they have different amounts for different family sizes, different ages, and different types of housing. And here I've illustrated some of those for you, some different family sizes. The Census Bureau gives you the poverty threshold, those total dollar amounts of income. What I provide you here is a wage rate that someone would have to earn in order to reach that threshold. And that's the wage rate that if you had only one adult working in the household, what that wage would have to be to reach that poverty threshold. And you can see it changes by family size. The poverty wage would be $6.13 for a single family with one adult in it. And you can see that's below the minimum wage, so that's a good thing as far as the official poverty statistics go. And as we increase the size, for instance, if we add a child, so this is a single mom with one child, the wage increases to $8.29 to reach that poverty threshold, and that's above the minimum wage. All right, so what are some of the statistics for for some different regions? And I'm going to compare, as I was going through this and preparing this, I found some interesting trends from 2017 to 2019. And so what I want to do is present 2017's poverty rate with the percentage of the population in poverty or below that poverty threshold, and then 2019 statistics. So if we look here for the nation, see back in 2017, the poverty rate was 12.3%, and now it's dropped pre-pandemic in 2019 to 10.5%. In Georgia, it's gone from 16.9 to 13.3 prior to the pandemic. In Alabama, it has also fallen, or had also fallen anyway, from 18% to 15.5%. Our metropolitan statistical area now contains 7 counties. I added Stewart and Talbot County. And if we look back at what the poverty rate was in the 7-county region, in 2017, it was 21.3%. And now in 2019, it was 19.1%. And then Muskogee County has the highest of all these regions. It was 23.7 in 2017 and 20.7 in 2019 prior to the pandemic. So all these areas experienced a reduction in poverty from 2017 up to the pandemic level. And we don't have statistics after the pandemic on the poverty rate, but I'm sure it's increased back up again. And whether it's above the 2017 numbers, I don't know. All right, well, those numbers, what we want to do is just focus before we get to something else. We want to look at these numbers, these official poverty statistics for this 7-county region. And we want to break that apart. So here on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the total population broken out between those that are not in poverty in blue and those that are below the poverty level in orange, 19%. What I want to do is break out that wedge of that 19% that are in poverty, and we'll look at how they're made up by age, by gender, by race, and by education. So if you look by age, that group is about 35% of that group that are in poverty are under the age of 18. There's about 60% of those are female. 60% designated their race as Black alone. And for those that are over 25, there's about 65% of those who have a high school education or less than a high school education. All right, and those are the official poverty level, those poverty statistics made by the Census Bureau. One of the drawbacks of that Census Bureau measure is that it doesn't account for other common household expenses. And so another poverty measure that's getting a lot of attention is a so-called living wage. And it was developed at MIT. And it's defined as the wage needed to cover some basic household expenses, not only the food cost, but also things like childcare, insurance, healthcare, housing, taxes, and things like that. It's adjusted also for family size and for cost of living in different areas. And there's a website there. If you were interested, you could go to it and you could look at different areas of what the living wage was or is. All right. And obviously, when we add in all these other costs, the living wage is going to be much higher than that poverty wage that I showed earlier. We see here for the same family sizes that I had up earlier, we see that it is. For that single adult household, the living wage is now over twice that. It's now $13.53 needed for a single adult to meet the basic household expenses to maintain that single adult household. And again, as we increase the family size, the living wage also increases. For that single mom that we talked about earlier, the living wage is more than triple the poverty wage. For a single adult trying to raise one child and working full time, they would need a wage of $27.34 to meet that living income, that living wage income. Okay, and while there's no official estimates of how many people are actually under the living income or that living wage threshold, we can get some idea of how many there are, a minimum number that there are in Columbus, and also what occupations they're in. So if we look at another graph here, lots of dots. Each of those dots represents an occupation, and this is data provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And again, unfortunately, it's pre-pandemic. That's the latest I have. The new data that includes some pandemic months will actually be out next week, but I don't have that yet. The Bureau of Labor Statistics provides information on over 800 different occupations based on a survey that they perform each year in May. And here we have the May 2019 data. Each dot represents an occupation. On the y-axis over here is the median wage. And by the median wage for each of those occupations, what we mean is that 50% of the people in those occupations earn above that wage and 50% earn below that wage. That's going to allow us to put some numbers on some different poverty measures. Okay, and the total employment for each of those occupations that you see listed here is given by the number on the horizontal axis here. For example, that yellow dot that I just highlighted that's kind of in the middle of the screen, those are registered nurses in our Columbus, Georgia, and Alabama MSA. There are 2,310 of those, and they earned a median wage of $29.66. And what that means is that half of those nurses earned above that wage and half earned below that wage. Okay, another note that I want to make is that this is survey data, and it's a mail survey, and everybody doesn't return those mail surveys. Okay, so there are occupations that are missing here. These, what we do have data for in here is 324 occupations, almost 95,000 individuals. But there are some occupations obviously missing. When I went through the data, things like physicians are not listed in this data. So there are things that are missing, but this is the best we have. All right, let me just highlight a few other points here on this graph. The highest paid, people want to know what that one is. That's chief executives. The median wage is $78.12, and there were 200 of chief executives in our area that answered the survey in May 2019. The yellow dots on the bottom right, those represent the occupations with low wages but high levels of employment. They're the waiters, waitresses, retail salespersons, customer service reps, cashiers, and fast food workers. The green dots, actually up here that are highlighted in the middle, that's kind of good news for our area. Those are relatively well-paying jobs between $30 and $40 an hour. And they're also relatively high levels of employment. Okay? There are 4,190 persons employed in those occupations, general and operations managers and registered nurses, whereas there's 17,310 persons employed in those yellow dots, those low wage, high occupation occupations. All right. So all the occupations on the bottom of the chart, those are the ones that are the lowest paid, and that actually may be okay if these are part-time jobs for maybe a high school student or a college student that's looking for a little extra money. But it's not okay if that's a occupation or a job that's held by someone who's trying to support themselves and maybe some family members. They are the ones that are most at risk of falling into poverty. And so in order to kind of put a number on that and put an idea how many people might be down there at those low wage occupations, we're going to add in some of those wages that I showed you earlier, the poverty wages and the living wages. So first we'll add in the poverty wage for a single adult. And you see here that all the occupations have median wages above that. Right? That's good news. All of them have above $6.13. That's probably because the minimum wage is $7.25. If we add in the $7.25, minimum wage, you can see that still all of those dots are above that. The median wage is still above the minimum wage. And all those dots are even above the poverty wage, the official statistic wage for one adult and one child of $8.29. Obviously, some of the people fall below it, but all those dots, median wages lie above it. Right. Well, the situation gets a little bleaker as we look at those living wages, because those add in those extra household expenses. If we look at the living wage for a single adult household with no children, just a single adult, $13.53, we see that there are quite a few occupations that have median wages below that wage. And by doing a little math, since that's the median wage, and so I know that half the people earn below that, we can get an idea of how many people are actually in those occupations. And it turns out there's 57 dots that are down there, which represent a minimum of 16,750 persons that are below that $13.53 threshold. All right, and it gets even worse. Again, what you would expect when we increase family size. Maybe this is a single mom raising a child, one child. The living wage is $27.34. There's lots of dots underneath that. And it turns out that that's 214 occupations and a minimum of 37,755 persons that earn below that. Okay. And one of the jobs of hiring well, doing good, one of the things they want to do is to try to get people in at those entry-level jobs, but then show them the pathway to move them up into those higher level occupations within that career path. All right, well, we know that the key to getting out of poverty is getting a well-paying job. So I'd like to shift gears a little bit and briefly discuss what's happened over the past year to the structure of our local labor market as a result of the pandemic. I'm going to focus on the labor market in Columbus and specifically look at the private sector jobs that are located in Columbus, because Columbus is really just the economic hub of our region. That's where most of those jobs are. And we'll start by looking at the labor market, what it looked like pre-pandemic. This chart breaks down the labor market by sector. This is the private labor market by sector. These are all the jobs that are available or that are filled in our economy. As you can see, the largest sectors are healthcare, accommodation and food services, retail, trade, and finance and insurance. And if you added up all those percentages for those four sectors, that's about almost 60% of our economy is in those four sectors. Comparing that pre-pandemic level to the post-pandemic or after the pandemic, the latest data that I have is only from Q3, the end of Q3 or September of 2020. And as of the end of that quarter, the percentage of employment in each sector is roughly the same. So there's really been no shifting of employment or jobs from one sector to another sector. But the problem is the whole number of jobs, that whole pie, has actually shrunk. The size of the pie, the total employment fell by 5.4% in Q3. So that's where it is currently, or the latest data I have. That means we had, at the end of the Q3, we had 4,026 jobs that were missing from pre-pandemic levels. All right, even though we were still down over 5%, that represented a significant recovery from what happened earlier in the year. So here's a chart showing the number of jobs in the first 9 months of last year compared to the same months in 2019. So the blue line's 2019, the orange line is 2020. You can see the immediate effects of the shutdown at the end of March, which caused nearly 13% reduction in the number of jobs. And we've slowly recovered since then. And a little bit of dip in July when we thought there'd be a second wave of the pandemic and kind of slowed things down again. But other than that, it's been a slow rise forward. And we're currently, or the latest data is the end of Q3 of down 5.4% of jobs. Okay, but as you know, the pandemic hasn't affected all the sectors equally. And so in this chart, I'm just looking at those top four sectors: the healthcare, food services and accommodation, retail, and financial services. And you can see here the large drop in jobs in the orange bar in April. Those were accommodation and food services as restaurants had to shut down. They slowly kind of reopened. They had to reopen at a limited capacity for social distancing. Some of them also switched to less labor intensive operations where they would just do takeout. So that just reduced the number of jobs in that industry, but you can see it's a slow path toward recovery in that sector. All four of these sectors have lost jobs relative to before the pandemic, and all but one, the financial sector, are on a path back to pre-pandemic levels. I think that's because you can see even in the first quarter, the financial sector lost jobs. I think that the reason they're still down below those pre-pandemic levels is because of the restructuring taking place at TSYS Global Payments and Synovus. At the bottom of the chart, I give you the total job loss numbers, and you can see in those four sectors, and you can see that basically that it's pretty much a constant 2/3 of the job losses that we're experiencing, the jobs that are missing from pre-pandemic levels are due to these four sectors. All right. So even though there has not been a shift or a change in the structure by the percentage of employment in each sector, we have seen a shrinkage of the total economy. Okay? And businesses are changing the way they do business as a response to that. And so in closing, what I want to do is highlight some of the results from recent national surveys regarding those changes. And then some of the panelists are also going to discuss some of the ways that local businesses have adapted in the short run and what their plans are for the long run. Nationally, you'll see that most of the changes are driven by the move toward telework, toward moving away from the office and toward work at home. So one survey showed that 34% of businesses switched from on-site to off-site work locations. So that's over 1/3 of the businesses. 80% of respondents indicated that they enjoy work from home. 41% actually thought that they became more productive. Okay, and that may mean that, because they enjoyed working from home, that may mean some longer term consequences as far as contracting with employees, that they may want to accept a lower salary in order to work from home. Another kind of long-term thing that may affect retention of talent is that 54% of respondents indicated that they would leave their current job for one that allowed them to work remotely. And while not continuously working from 9 to 5, working from home actually increased the workday by 8.2% or 48.5 minutes. And that increasing in telework has also caused changes in office space and also residential space. Office space is being remodeled to become more social friendly with shared workspaces and meeting spaces, and also some video studios. And also that's going on with the residential building design, as we want a dedicated home office space, maybe some video space, and also better internet connectivity, because that's what makes you efficient when you're working from home. All right, I went through that pretty quick. I just would like to thank you, and I hope you enjoyed your meal. And now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Cockling, who will guide you through the rest of the panelists. Just as a quick introduction, Eric works with Kristen at the Georgia Center for Opportunity, where he has served in various roles over the past 13 years, including as Executive Vice President. Today, Eric is Chief Program Officer and General Counsel, a role that allows him to help advance GCO's mission through its programs and public policy work. Eric is a proud Georgia native and has 3 children with his wife, Laura. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Dr. Blair. Appreciate that very much. That was a great introduction and kind of setting the stage for where we are during this during the pandemic and kind of the outcomes that we've seen in the economy from the pandemic. I want to say thank you as well to our panelists for giving up their time today and in preparation for the event, and just sharing their insights into what our communities are actually doing in response to COVID and the things that we've done in response to that. Thank you as well to SHRM, the Columbus chapter here of SHRM, for sponsoring the event and for promoting it to your members. We appreciate that very much. And thank you as well to the Chamber of Commerce for their help as well. And finally, Kristen, I just want to thank you specifically for spearheading the event and for helping me and the panelists keep track of details and making sure that we were doing what we needed to be ready for today. Thank you for that. So as I said, Dr. Blair set the stage really well, I think, for the discussion that we're going to have today. And I think we can all say we saw a lot of what Dr. Blair was talking about and continue to see it in terms of lost jobs, businesses closing, people suffering because of what's happened with COVID and our response to it and shutting big parts of the economy kind of down for a long period of time. Strangely, or maybe not, given how challenges open up opportunities, we've also seen businesses and people flourish in ways that maybe we weren't expecting because COVID allowed them to take advantage of opportunities to serve people while they were at home. So it's given and it's taken away, COVID has. So today, with that in mind, we're going to hear from several leaders here in the Columbus community who have very good vantage points to see the impact of COVID more broadly here in Columbus. And just as important is the community's response to COVID and trying to help those in our communities really respond well. So from what they've seen and what they share with us, I hope that we can sort of tease out innovations, experience, and learning that can help us really understand how to respond in the future, both in how we continue to respond to COVID, but also for things that may come up in the future, whether it's a pandemic or some other major event that shocks the economy and requires us to shift like COVID has caused us. There are good lessons to be learned to apply for the future. So with that in mind, I'll now turn to our panel discussion. This is kind of how it's going to work. I'm going to introduce each panelist in turn. They're going to have a few minutes to kind of say some introductory remarks. And after that, we're going to have our panel discussion with Q&A. And during the Q&A session, I just want to make it clear that we really would love to have questions from you guys. I mean, I have questions that I can ask, but I think you all find it much more interesting if they're responding to your questions rather than mine. So please feel free to use the Q&A button or the chat button, whichever one you want to use, to put in your questions, and we will get to those in turn. So thank you for that. Also, I think Kristen is going to ask at least one more polling question during the session, so feel free to respond to that when she asks it. All right, with that out of the way, I want to introduce our first panelist. Betsy Covington is the president and CEO of the Community Foundation of the Chattahoochee Valley. And since joining the foundation in 2001, Betsy has worked alongside the board to position this organization to enable and promote philanthropy that inspires, facilitates, and fosters a vibrant and engaged Chattahoochee Valley. And Betsy, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And thanks, Kristen, for this invitation. We've been looking forward to this. And I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about our organization and what we've seen during COVID and how I hope you'll think we have responded well. So quite quickly, I don't ever want to assume that people know everything there is to know about the Community Foundation. We've been around for 23 years, but we oftentimes kind of operate behind the scenes. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And think of us as a bit of an umbrella organization under which there are various different funds that operate to do charitable work. Almost anything, we can do almost anything in the community as long as our board can be convinced that that work is charitable. We have 330 different funds that were contributed by individuals and families, businesses, other nonprofit organizations to do specific things. Sometimes they do very general things. Collectively, we have assets right now of just under $250 million. We do grant making between $15 and $20 million a year, most of that here in this community. So we're grant makers. We provide a lot of assistance to our donors to help them understand what opportunities exist in the community and to help them give confidently. We are based on collaboration and partnership, and you'll hear that a lot through my remarks today. Our business model is based on an economy of scale. So when people contribute funds to us, they are pooled for investment purposes with other funds. And so far, we, by our mathematical equations, have determined that the Community Foundation, over 23 years of existence, has added at least $80 million in philanthropic value to this community. So that's good news for everybody. So we focus on our donors and helping them be raging philanthropists, very excited about what they can accomplish in our community. We focus on our nonprofit community, and we focus broadly on larger community issues. I'll talk more about that in a second. If you look at the Community Foundation's logo, and my visual aid is our annual report that you can find at cfcv.com. It has sort of four leaves or prongs. So if one's donors, one's nonprofits, one's community at large, the fourth one is the way our organization operates. And we are dedicated to being above and beyond best practices for community foundations. And for us, that really talks about those partnerships. Although we're not really a programming organization per se, we do occasionally, we're more likely to fund a program than to implement it ourselves. But y'all may know us through 3 years of making On the Table possible for our community. And the last year of On the Table, 7,500 people in this community sat down with each other in small groups to talk about how they can have an impact in our community. Those are the kind of conversations we get really excited about. And oh man, do I miss them. In this last year, I'm really looking forward to being able to not just talk to other people, but really listen about what their experiences have been through this. I love that I'm getting to be on a panel with Gerald from the Chamber and Ben Moser from United Way. When I took this job at the Community Foundation 20 years ago, our board chair at the time told me that community foundations are part of the three-legged stool that exists in a community to help get things done. The other two components are a strong Chamber of Commerce and a strong United Way. So we've all got to work really well together. And I will tell you that if you believe, like I do, that the future of our community depends on our ability to attract, develop, and retain talent, the addition of Ben Moser and Gerald Mitchell to this community means we are on the right track. They are fantastic partners who've really jumped into their work, and particularly doing it in collaboration with others during this pandemic in a big way. One big example that the Community Foundation has seen in collaborative potential is Columbus 2025. You may know of this as a project that lives at the Chamber of Commerce, but I tell people all the time, it's not a Chamber project. It is a project that belongs to all of us in our community. The mission of Columbus 2025 is to help us reduce poverty, increase prosperity, and improve the quality of life for everybody. It involves partners at almost every level of our community, governments, and not just Columbus, the multi-county region, government, education, nonprofits. Every sector is represented in 2025. And if it's not something that you know much about, please visit the website and check it out. In full disclosure, I'm currently the chair of Columbus 2025, but I don't share that as any kind of advertisement for me. I'm doing that work because of the Community Foundation's belief that we are stronger together and we're better when we as a community make goals that we can accomplish. Certainly 2025 has been affected by COVID like all of us have, but I am so excited to tell you that the work continues. The plans are strong and in place. And as we emerge, I think you're going to see big things happening to advance our community. I want to quickly talk about work during COVID. Of course, like a lot of you, the Community Foundation has switched to all remote work. I now feel like we use our great office on 13th Street as a mail center, which kind of makes me sad, but I also feel really fortunate that our staff has been able to stay safe and protected and to protect our families. I know that that puts us in a position of privilege, and I'm grateful for it, but the responsibilities then become greater to help others, right? So while we're in this position, we immediately have tried to think about everything we can do to help our community respond well to the crisis. And I don't want to steal any of Ben Moser's thunder, but I want to tell you that one of the things we're most proud of is our partnership with United Way in the Coronavirus Response Fund. Collaboratively, we stood this fund up back in mid-March of 2020. And it took a phone call where I always laugh and say it took me, I think, like 0.03 seconds to convince Ben that this was something for us to do. He was instantly in. And we have collected money from a broad community, and we continue to distribute it to organizations that are helping people at their most vulnerable situations. We're helping our neighbors. And I've said through this crisis that we've seen our community kind of slip a few rungs on Maslow's triangle, right? Where people have now been consumed with safety issues and protection issues and health issues. And the Coronavirus Response Fund has been able to make grants to a lot of the organizations you saw featured in that introductory video. In fact, one of our early grants was to support the work that the YMCA was doing to help provide childcare for those Piedmont workers. And so we've made grants to Mercy Med. We have so far through the Coronavirus Response Fund given away 105 grants that total $1,339,910. And the end is not in sight. If you want to see the list of grants and learn more, go to cfcv.com/coronavirus. You're welcome to contribute yourself. We'd love to have your support. And all of the easy ways to do that are right there at cfcv.com/coronavirus. The other thing that Ben and I did that has been fascinating, at least for me, was on March 17th of 2020, we started a community call. I see this as really connected to that Coronavirus Response Fund because we knew we needed ways to get information about what was happening in the community. And we initially had the calls every day with political leaders from across our communities, healthcare leaders, school district superintendents telling us what's going on, nonprofits telling us what they see in the community and what they need help with. We did calls for a year, and we've just retired the call as of this March 17th, but with promises that if we see the need to shift it back into gear, we'll do it. We've just seen this go from being a less of an acute crisis to more of a chronic crisis. So I hope I'm gonna let Ben talk. I hope he'll talk about the Chattahoochee Valley Child Equity Collaborative because that's another way we're partnering. But I will tell you that we at the Community Foundation are watching this philanthropic environment carefully as we begin to see light at the end of the tunnel. We are all cognizant that our arts and culture organizations just had to shut down for the most part. We want to invest in smart ways that help them get back on their feet as quickly as possible. We're trying to protect investment. And one of the things I'll tell you that we're doing is a program in consortium with other funders in the community, including United Way, but several private foundations as well, called Risk-a-Palooza. And it's a 4-part series in April that will help nonprofit organizations make sure they're doing everything they can to understand how to manage risk in their organization as they go forward. It's free. If anybody on this call represents a nonprofit and doesn't know about Risk-a-Palooza, or you're on the board, find out if they're already signed up. If you need information, you can contact Kelly Parker at the Community Foundation. Her email is kparker@cfcv.com. And with that, I'll hush and turn it back over to my other panelists, but I'm happy to answer questions as we go forward about how partnership and collaboration is really a key to success here.
Betsy, thank you for that. That was great. And look forward to following up on some of what you said in our Q&A session. Next up, I'd like to introduce Gerald Mitchell. Gerald is the president and chief executive officer of the Greater Columbus, Georgia Chamber of Commerce, where he leads the charge to advance the regional economy through economic development, innovation, community engagement, corporate development, existing industry growth and resilience, and redevelopment. He has held various senior roles in economic development, both with the state of Georgia and at organizations in coastal Georgia. Gerald, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Likewise, thank you so much, Eric, and thank you to Kristen and the rest of the team. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to connect with everybody today. And Betsy is so kind, but I will tell you, Betsy has been just such an instrumental part of making my transition over the last 6 months into the Columbus community work, and it's been fantastic. So thank you for that. I too am extremely happy to have the opportunity to work with great partners like Betsy and Ben. We've got so much work to do, but I feel so confident that we're up to the challenge. Again, thank you guys for everything you do, and I'm happy to be with you. So I'm going to start by, again, framing what the Chamber does. I don't want to assume that everybody knows. I think everybody's heard the term, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've had the opportunity to interact. And if you haven't, I really challenge you and encourage you to begin to explore partnership with us here at the Chamber. But as an organization, the Chamber function on its face really sets out to be a platform for businesses to coordinate, to collaborate, to connect with the hopes of growing a stronger business community throughout whatever community it resides in. And that's an activity that the Columbus Chamber has been instrumental in for years. In addition to those Chamber of Commerce activities, we also have operational responsibility for other activities. Betsy mentioned Columbus 2025. It absolutely is a community initiative, and we're really proud to be a part of it as from an operational standpoint, because it absolutely encompasses or touches on the things that your typical development authority and Chamber of Commerce frankly, get challenged about not undertaking. And this really is an endeavor or initiative that does that. We have the opportunity to be better community partners because of it. And I look forward to continuing to stay very, very closely attached to the activities of Columbus 2025 and helping it succeed as our community's initiative. In addition to that, we have operational responsibility for the Muskogee County Development Authority, which is Columbus's economic development organization. And in that role, we are feverishly working to build strategies that help us attract new companies, new economic growth and capital investment into our community. As a part of Columbus 2025, we've also got an organization called Startup Columbus. And Startup Columbus is our incubator. It is our foray into innovation and entrepreneurism. And it's right now a fledgling organization that is poised for enormous and tremendous growth. We've got a foundation that also does community good and frankly, is set up to support those foundational or 501c3 type activities that the Chamber doesn't typically get into because of the structure. So again, it's another vehicle or tool that we have the ability to use. And then there's another aspect or component called the Valley Partnership, which is the Regional Development Authority activity. So while we focus on growth and economic development and do a lot of that in Columbus, we also work to market, promote, and leverage economic tools and activities throughout the region that can help us all grow a better, stronger, more vibrant and viable region from an economic standpoint. And overall, throughout the COVID environment, what we've realized or recognized is that the Chamber of Commerce is having to refocus and figure out how we can leverage all of the components that we have at our disposal, or all the tools that we have at our disposal, to rethink how we engage and grow a better, stronger, more economically vibrant community. And what we typically, or what we're learning from that, and we've done some strategic planning, we know that it's really important that we get our arms around this coming out of COVID, but it's leveraging traditional activities like policy on the government affairs side, member partnerships or memberships, branding and marketing, and the events that we do to grow support for economic growth, talent attraction, development and retention, innovation, placemaking, which I think we also use the term vibrancy or vibrant and connected places, and then inclusion. Our work in making sure that we are building an economic ladder that everybody can participate in. Again, the COVID environment has been extremely ambiguous. And as a result of that, we're redefining our focus on things like existing industry, small business, workforce development, and evaluating the impact on the commercial market. And that one, I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, but that one's a little bit harder to see right now because some of the impact on the commercial market we won't see until companies get back into full swing and we know what's happening as it relates to employees going back to offices, how space is absorbed, or how new space becomes more vacant. So again, that's one of those big question marks for now. But from a workforce standpoint, re-engaging in terms of how we build pipelines, how we connect people to opportunities, small business engagement, being very specific as it relates to outreach to businesses that have 50 or fewer than 50 employees. From a small business standpoint, frequently those are businesses that see challenges with access to capital. They have financial challenges that center around things like health insurance and others. So we're working to bring those solutions to the businesses. And then on the existing industry side, we're focusing there on businesses that have more than 50 employees. And what we find primarily to be an area of concern for those businesses are workforce. And it's how to deliver, develop, and retain sticky employees or workforces. General challenges that we've seen or heard from businesses during this COVID environment have been centered around things like the emotional impact on employees. I myself have a little bit of cabin fever. We've been trying to be really safe in our work environment, allowing more remote work, hybrid type schedules and events. And again, I think as humans, we're built to interact. We're built to be with one another. And that's been challenging for those of us who thrive on that, not to be able to have it. E-commerce is booming. That's a good thing, but it's also something that has an impact on businesses that don't have a significant or substantial e-commerce subscriber base, so to speak. And now they're having to pivot into a market or field that is either crowded or that is owned or operated by large incumbents. And not knocking Amazon at all, but Amazon is a large incumbent, and I can't imagine being a small business that now has to compete on that level. Traditional economic development is harder because the engagement model's changed. We're having to be creative in terms of how we get the value and benefits of being in the Columbus community out to those people that aren't here and are looking to expand their businesses. Again, we want to make sure that we stay on the radar, and now it's easier for everybody to get to them. So we have to be even more deliberate about gross impressions to that universe. And the other piece that I alluded to already is that companies are having challenges finding employees. So from an economic growth standpoint, firms are being very innovative. They're making some pivots that are fascinating or fantastic. I'll give you an example. Golden's Foundry, which is actually next door to our office. They generally operate in scrap metal and those types of products. But throughout the pandemic, one of the products that has become fleeting from a manufacturing and production standpoint have been kettlebells, because people are buying those and doing workouts at home. Well, Golden's has basically stood up a line of manufacturing that is producing kettlebells, and that has helped their operation. Again, fascinating way to pivot. Of course, we know about how restaurants and retailers have shifted to curbside pickup, those sorts of things to continue to be able to operate and deliver products and services to their clients. Some sectors are thriving, as we all know, some are not. Some sectors are, for instance, automotive. When I have conversations with organizations like PTAP, again, this has been good for them. People are taking the opportunity to invest in hobbies or invest in their vehicles. So that's been good for some businesses. But again, we know that there are some that have seen some extreme challenges as a result of this environment. One of the things that I thought was interesting in some of our conversations with small business was that, we had a conversation with small business and with the city, and small businesses were not, even through all of the pain and struggle, they were not asking for forgiveness on fees that are due to city government. They were asking for deferments. They're saying everything's due at one time of the year, and if you could just spread that out for us, we'll make sure that we pay you. And I thought that was really fascinating, because nobody's asking to be able to abscond, so to speak, from their obligation. They want to do it. They just need a little bit more breathing room to be able to handle those things. So I thought that was fascinating. Again, as a nonprofit, what we've been focused on in terms of direct support for businesses is being a concierge to businesses in terms of helping them get into the PPP pipeline. We'll continue to do that. We're trying to, again, work through cohorts that can unlock additional workforce development potential. We're having a conversation currently with the Construction Education Foundation of Georgia about a workforce development cohort there. And there are others. So again, we look forward to continuing to figure out how to develop and add value to this workforce development mix. Again, we're renewing focus on non-traditional economic development growth. That is looking at things like the Dragonfly Trail and others to see how those things can catalyze a new wave of economic development and economic growth for our community. Again, it's all about economic growth and mobility, creating an economy that everybody can participate in. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about the reduction in labor force. And as we all know, there have been reductions in labor force. Companies have leveraged this environment to recalibrate where it makes sense. There is potential available workforce as a result of that. And that is actually a very skilled workforce, as companies have offered some packages. So again, I think there is an opportunity for companies that are looking for those skilled workforce participants that have experience and have a breadth of knowledge that can be delivered. We've seen or heard about an increase in ghosting, where people have been no shows, no calls, and are just abandoning employment. We don't know exactly why that's happening, but that is something that we're hearing has increased in this environment. Several companies we know of have openings. They're trying to find people to fill job opportunities. There's an economic development pipeline. There are projects out there. We're trying to be as competitive as we can as it relates to locating or talking about the value of Columbus and locating those projects here so that we can place more people. And then the other piece of it that is, on the extreme end, and it is that some firms have completely closed. We hate to see that loss, and we want to do everything that we can to support our companies and our employees to the extent that we possibly can in delivering resources that can help people through these sorts of things. But again, we're going to keep doing what we know needs to happen as it relates to driving opportunities, driving workforce development solutions, and listening so that we can, again, be a chamber that is more a part of the community and helpful in that regard. So again, thanks. I'll stop there, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Gerald, thank you for that. Very insightful, and it's great to hear all that the chamber is doing in Columbus. It's inspiring. Thank you for that. All right, next up we have Ben Moser. Ben is president and CEO of United Way of Chattahoochee Valley, and he's been on the job since August 1st, 2019, which, Ben, clearly you didn't know what was coming the following March, right? Before that, Ben served as the director of major gifts for the United Way of Asheville and Buncombe County, located in Asheville, North Carolina, one of the most beautiful places in the South, in my opinion, and held several positions at the United Way of Forsyth County, located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Ben, it's great to have you. I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here. And thank you to the Jordan Center for opportunity, to Hiring Well and Doing Good, and to Kristen for holding this event, allowing me to be part of it. Really appreciate that. And to Betsy and Gerald for the partnerships that we have. You know, the Chattahoochee Valley does partnerships really, really well, and I'm very honored to be here. I think this is a very important topic and also still evolving, if not daily anymore, certainly on a weekly and monthly basis as we move, as Betsy said, from that crisis footing to a chronic issue with COVID and the fallout of COVID. The last year has been one of those historical markers that may in 20 years be seen alongside the Civil War, the Great Depression, World War II, and 9/11 as creating great and lasting change in American society and really in the global economy. So if there was any question about the interconnectivity of all of us and communities across the world, and even a single person can actually change the entire world for good or for ill, I think that argument has been settled. We are certainly all in this together. Now, certainly we are not all in this together equitably. The pandemic has further exposed historic fault lines in the economy, in society, in the ways we work, in our health, in the ways we eat, in the ways we're housed, and in the ways we learn. And from the perspective of United Way, it has pushed us farther and faster on some business changes that we are in the process of making, specifically regarding the use of technology, flexible work schedules, and how we engage with partners. Out of the pandemic has arose, as Betsy talked about, what I consider a transformational partnership with the Community Foundation. You know, we've always worked really well together, but we've worked better together and more closely together through the work of the Coronavirus Response Fund and the community calls than certainly any professional partnership that I've ever been engaged in. And I'm eternally and daily grateful for that partnership and for Betsy's leadership. Our foundation partnerships, our corporate partnerships, the partnerships with our individual donors have really all been enhanced during COVID because of the need in the community, because of the incredible generosity in this community, and really because of the ability of our nonprofit community to step in and step up and get things done for vulnerable populations when it was really needed most. You know, at United Way, we talk a lot about leading with a growth mindset. I believe there's really no standing still. You're either growing or you're shrinking. And that's not just revenue based. It's intellectually, spiritually, organizationally, and in our capacity for leadership. Leadership is always important, but it has been more important over the last year and certainly more important in times of crisis. And we are really blessed here in the Chattahoochee Valley to have outstanding leaders like Betsy and Gerald, as well as throughout our nonprofit sector, our government sector, the mayor here in Columbus and in Phoenix City, Mayor Lowe, just fantastic leaders. Our public pre-K through 12 education leaders are really top notch here in this area. Dr. Lewis and Dr. Wilkes and Ms. Coley, Dr. Coley over in Russell County, our health systems, our higher ed leaders. It's a remarkable place for leadership. And it's been a remarkable experience to be a part of it. Um, it's been amazing to be a part of this response in the community with so many of these great leaders that I mentioned. Two exceptional nonprofit areas I'd like to highlight. Child service, and this is not to the detriment of any of the others, just two that have really stood out in our work: child services and food supply. I think that we have served our youth and we have fed people extraordinarily well through this crisis, through the work of all the agencies doing that work, as well as through the Coronavirus Response Fund. Boys and Girls Clubs and their great leader, Rodney Close, Girls Inc. and Arlene Charles, Frank Shepard at Feeding the Valley, and the entire ecosystem of nonprofits providing for vulnerable populations in these areas have adapted, evolved, and innovated at a pace that really only the cauldron of crisis can create. An example of transformational change from history, when we look back on this, I think World War II jumps to mind. In 1938, we had under 400,000 enlisted personnel and no Coast Guard. And by 1945, we had over 12 million men and women in uniform, including a new branch of the military with over 100,000 personnel patrolling our coastline. I think COVID will be no different when we're able to look back at the chart and chart the changes in our society and in the economy 20 years from now. At United Way, we have truly outstanding long tenured leadership across the organization, and it has made all the difference in this year like no other. Our United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley has been around for 70 years, and we're best known for running a fall campaign and investing that money back into the community through local nonprofits every spring. But over the last couple of years, we have added some new strategies. Community Schools United is something that you're going to be hearing a lot more about. Betsy alluded to Resilient Chattahoochee Valley, the Child Equity Collaborative. That's a partnership with the Community Foundation, working on adverse childhood experiences, reducing those and reducing the impact of those in our community. The Basics, which came out of Columbus 2025 and is funded by the Community Foundation, another outstanding new strategy and partnership that we're privileged to house. And all of those are really focused on getting kids a good start in life. And then Home for Good, our department of our United Way, which is working to end homelessness in our areas, has really expanded through this. I just want to talk about the leadership at our organization briefly. Becky Fletcher led our campaign to the second straight record year this year, shifting a campaign run in hundreds of break rooms and boardrooms across the region and done with paper pledge forms to an all virtual and e-pledge heavy campaign. Really an extraordinary achievement to overshoot our goal by hundreds of thousands of dollars in this challenging environment. Chandra Wright, been with us for 15 years. Becky's been with us for, I think, 21 or 22 years at this point. Chandra's been with us for 15 years. If I started ticking off the influence Chandra's had at our organization, we would be here all day. But in our marketing, our elected official engagement, our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, her leadership has really been a game changer. Jennifer St. John leads our community initiatives and investment process and is integral to the Coronavirus Response Fund work. And it's taken an enormous new responsibilities that have come from her, her ability to have an extraordinary dedication and focus. She's just taken on so much. And John Greenhall, our CFO, really expertly managed our finances and operations, was very early in securing our PPP stimulus. And then Pat Frey, our other vice president at Home for Good, has just been amazing in her leadership. We became the only United Way in the state of Georgia to lead a regional coalition working to distribute millions of dollars of Georgia Department of Community Affairs block grant funding regarding COVID related to housing issues. So we're really, really proud of that work. Even with all this amazing work though, and adaptation, innovation, there are really a lot of challenges still remaining. And as Ben's data pointed out, we have a poverty problem in the Chattahoochee Valley, and it affects families with young children at much higher rates. Therefore, a strategic area of focus and paramount importance for our United Way is child well-being, because we think we can get to the whole family by focusing on that data. If left unchecked, childhood poverty, I believe, will destroy our potential, not just as a community, but as a society. The country already spends over $1 trillion a year, 28% of our federal budget, dealing with issues of childhood poverty. This is an area currently in great focus and really in strategic play in the United States, and we are committed to being part of those solutions. As I've said, we've moved into, and as Betsy said, a chronic long-term issue with COVID. We've learned that we are very resilient and innovative, and that this community rises to meet challenges. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of it and really look forward to the Q&A ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Excellent. So a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. We're going to extend our Q&A session to 12:35, just to make up for a little lost time at the beginning because we started just a bit late. If you need to drop off at 12:30, that's perfectly fine. But I want to make sure we get to some of your questions. I appreciate the questions that have been asked, excellent ones. And I want to make sure our panel is back before I start throwing questions at them. All right, there they go. All right, so thanks again. Your remarks were terrific. And I want to pick up on a question that's been asked in our chat, and I want to combine it with one of mine because they're very similar, and that is the poor in our community. We know how big a issue that is. I mean, Ben laid that out very well earlier. They're also the population that's hit hardest when things turn south, like it has during COVID. And they're also the ones who are most likely to, come out of it the slowest, if at all. Labor force participation rates are down pretty low. Like I think it's lower than any time in history right now. And a lot of that has to do with that population kind of just dropping out. And so the question here from the audience is, with it being such a big issue, do companies have to look at paying people more? Do we have to look at things that actually get the pay scale up? And what's driving those sorts of decisions? Gerald, it's mainly a question to you. Of course, everybody that has thoughts, please weigh in, but this person would like to know that. What's sort of the basis of salaries that companies have right now?
Yeah, so it is a challenge in that what we're hearing a good bit of is that people are making choices related to what they think are relatively low wages. And from a chamber standpoint, we can't tell a company what to pay. They have to make a decision based on based on their process, based on profit margins. They have to make some decisions, but it creates a challenge for them too, right? Because, in some cases, I think a case could be made for, paying another $2 an hour might actually save you the 20 or 30% of your time that you're spending in a vicious ongoing hiring cycle. So we are hearing a lot of feedback on both sides of that. There are some companies that won't be able to pay more until their volumes change. I've spoken to one company that does participate kind of in that lower end, but it's the type of work that's required is manual. It doesn't require a lot of skill. But they're also in a scenario where they've lost several clients as a result of COVID, and the volume's not there for that company to then come in and pay higher wages. So it's really, frankly, a catch-22. We're in an environment where we believe there is an availability of workforce or wage, and we also know that there is an availability of job opportunities. And matching the two, we've got to get better at how we market or promote or talk about, the calculation or decision that people have to make as it relates to whether or not they can take an opportunity. So.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Ben, I'm sure Ben's got some really good feedback on that.
Ben or Betsy?
I think long-term, it's an education issue. We have to invest in our youth in order to have that workforce that we need for the future. I can't speak as as well, and certainly not as eloquently as Gerald, to, the wage hour issues and those types of things. But we need to have a wage that supports dignity for our working poor, that allows them to work and to be able to feed their families and to have that dignity in their lives. And so whatever that number is, I think that it needs to come up a little bit. Short and midterm, I think it's training and outreach and economic development. And then the education piece, of course, is there throughout, and just getting information out to folks about the opportunities that are available and trying to match up those skill sets, working with our community college, our technical college, our other institutions of higher learning, to get folks trained and to get them into occupations that can provide for their family stability in the long term.
Absolutely.
That's great.
I'll agree with Ben that I think this is a cyclical thing. I mean, this is not an overnight, response to COVID, what are wages going to look like in our community. This is a long-term, lifetime opportunity. And I'm glad that one of the focus areas of Columbus 2025 is talented, educated people. And we're seeing alignment of conversation from that, along that cradle to career continuum, in a way that I don't think has ever existed in our community before.
Yep. Starting
with the basics, which I'll plug. If any of you have kids or know of children from that birth to age 3 timeline, visit cv.thebasics.org. It lives at United Way. It's funded by the Community Foundation, but it's very much part of 2025, and a chance to get our youngest citizens off on the right foot in terms of brain development. It's not just about education. It is actually literally developing their brains to be able to be ready for lifelong learning. So this is a long game, folks.
Amen.
Completely agree.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, GCO, we talk about, the first job, next job, career sort of progress that people can make. And in setting wages, in terms of public policy, you got to be mindful of, teenagers losing opportunities and there being fewer opportunities to get on that first rung, of the pay scale, so that you can move up. So it's a tricky balancing act that we have to play. So all good responses. And related to that, so training and upskilling are big issues, especially soft skills. And we know how big those are, and companies talk about those frequently as being deficiencies that they see. Hard skills are important as well. And one of the questions really points to that and is asking, as people have lost jobs, there's a group that just don't have the skills to go into those higher wage jobs that you were just talking about. Are you seeing anything that gives you, would give you comfort or encouragement that the community is starting to respond to that and provide that for folks?
So I think the answer is yes. I think it goes to a lot of the different tools and assets that we have in the community. Columbus 2025 and its focus and Betsy, thank you so much for championing that. But the focus on workforce development or talent is there. And what I see at the technical college system is another added benefit. We're getting outreach from various organizations, again, about how we deliver cohorts that help train to different skill sets. Again, we've been talking about the Construction Education Foundation of Georgia and how to deliver a basic skill set. There's Truth Springs, that is another group that is working to do something very similar. So again, I think that we're fortunate in that there's a lot of energy in that arena. Now we've got to continue to push, and hopefully in the near term we'll see some results from that.
Excellent.
One of the things, and this is maybe a super specific answer, but I wanted to pull it up on my computer so I get the name right. Columbus Technical College has really recognized that a lot of students who drop out have to drop out because of less than $1,000. And they've set up this new student success fund that is designed to help plug that gap. I know that in the Regents program in Georgia, so this is happening at CSU as well. If you haven't paid your semester bill by a certain number of days after classes start, you get automatically dropped from classes. And they're students who are being dropped because of very low balances. And these are, I mean, you talk about your low-hanging fruit. Good gracious, these are small investments that we can make that pay off big over a person's lifetime. So I'm real interested in trying to find those opportunities. There's some heavy lifts we have as a community as well, and we don't shy away from those. But let's be smart and try to think of ways that we can help remove barriers for people who are already on the right tracks. So.
Yeah, and Betsy, that's a fantastic point. And I think the dollar amount that on average they're seeing is something like $300 or $400.
Right.
So yeah, that's a really big program.
Yep.
I'm assuming that.
Yeah, that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we need to make those types of smart investments, because I mean that's really investing in our future with a low investment for a really high return rate. So I couldn't agree more there.
So I don't know if you guys see it like we do here, but there's also a deficit in the public knowing about these programs, their availability. We see that a lot around the WIOA program and the schools that actually implement those funds. I mean, it's a terrific opportunity, but there's always seems to be capacity in that program when I know people need it and would use it if they just knew about it. Is that a big issue in Columbus as well?
I think it's a big issue. Yeah, go ahead, Gerald.
No, you go ahead, please, and I'll jump in after you.
I think getting information out is a big hurdle everywhere, and there are programs across the board here in the Chattahoochee Valley that could be helping thousands of more people than they are, but folks don't know about it. Messaging is a huge challenge. It's a challenge in nonprofits across the board because of limited resources, because of some limited skill sets there. Big corporations have challenges with it, and they spend billions of dollars a year on messaging. So absolutely, there are lots of fantastic things going on out there, but if people don't know about it, they're not serving as many folks as they could be. So that is an area of growth for us, without a doubt.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. And, I think if we could just put everything on Instagram or TikTok, I think we would solve this problem. But yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Ben. Mostly this is outside of nonprofits, it's government, and governments frequently deal with, restrictions on leveraging public dollars for marketing. So frequently you do see that they've got these fantastic program offerings that they just can't get the word out on because they can't spend the money to be engaged in the platforms that are going to reach the most people. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
don't get me started on how news is shared in communities, because I can go for hours, but I think it's the challenge of our age, to be perfectly honest. I know that sounds like a broad statement. We have so many news sources these days, but a lot of them are news sources. The old days of a town square where everybody in a community knew what was going on and they knew how to get involved and they knew where the table was and where their seat was at the table, those days are gone. You have to make it for yourself, and it's hard. I'm interested in how all three of our organizations can do as much as we can to help open those doors for people who want to be engaged in our community, whether it's from a philanthropic perspective or a business perspective or an opportunity perspective. And how do we share that information well? I don't think I have all the great answers yet, but if we've seen anything in the last year, it's that where people get their news really matters. Mm-hmm. And accuracy matters, and truth still exists. So these are hard things, not really within the parameters of this conversation, but always in the back of my head.
So Gerald's probably onto something with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, right? Yeah. So, a related question, and this came up in our chat too, but Gerald, you had talked earlier about the growing problem of ghosting and not showing up to opportunities. And the question here is, and this is touchy, but I'd like to see what you think. How much are the stimulus checks playing into that phenomenon right now? And that piece I would add on to that is, until those stimulus checks stop coming, are there any things that can be done to encourage people to kind of look past the stimulus check and look at maybe a vision for their future that would get them active now, either working or getting ready for work?
So I think I think it has an impact for sure. And I think that people are assessing their risk, especially in scenarios where they haven't been able to get good health care or have access, as far as they perceive it, access to the vaccines. I think that some people are calculating their risk, and at the end of the day, it's math. And they're saying that for this situation, they might be better off for a little bit longer than they were pre-stimulus. So again, it's a tough situation. I think that, again, this is where education again creeps back into the fray, because you've got folks that have lived day to day. Some folks have lived day to day for a really long time, and they haven't had the luxury ever in their life of being able to plan for what it looks like, 6 months or a year down the road. So when they've got a certain number of dollars in their hand, and they're only thinking about literally tomorrow, the calculus changes, and sometimes it causes an adverse impact, not only for them, but for our community and for businesses. So again, I think there are a lot of contributing factors, and I don't want to pretend that I know it all, but I think that, it has an impact.
Yeah, I was listening, Gerald, to you talking about the ghosting issue earlier today, and my brain kind of went in some interesting places thinking about what could be causing that. And I am no HR perspective. I'm an HR professional. I know there are a lot of them on this call, but I think we shouldn't discount the effect that this pandemic has had on mental health. I'm not sure any of us, and I include myself in that, absolutely, are making decisions at our best level right this minute. Even though we're past that sort of panic stage of this is scary stuff. And I mean, it just seems like it keeps coming and there aren't answers, and, are we doing the right thing? And nobody knows. So I can't imagine what it would be like to be somebody who is in a job seeking environment right now, trying to make those kind of decisions for myself and for my family. And I don't have the solution, obviously, to our community's mental health issues, but we know they're there. And let's don't forget that my 4-year-old told me one time, most people are just trying to do the best they can. And I think there's a lot of that out there right now.
I don't think I can add anything to those two answers. So they hit on everything.
No worries at all. No worries. And you're right. None of us are probably operating at our optimum right now, given all that we've been through. And I think that's probably made worse by the fact that, we're hearing about COVID variants, and maybe the vaccines are not going to be as effective as we hope that they would long term. So maybe we're, this COVID world that we've been in is going to be here for a while, and we just don't know it yet, so that makes it all very tough. Sort of the last question, given the time that we have, I want to get to something that I wanted to ask, and be as brief as you can be on this. It's a little bit of a complicated question, but given what you've seen in your communities, what are you seeing? You've touched on some innovations that you've seen, both like on the business side in response to COVID and maintaining business and a profit, but also on the community side and responding to the downturn. What are you seeing in those things that you think, while it seemed like it might be a temporary response, you really think it's going to be something that's sort of a permanent feature of how we live going forward? If you have any thoughts on that.
I'll jump in here. Sorry.
No, you go. You set the last one out. You're always smart. Go.
So I really think that the flexible work schedules, as well as putting health and wellness first, are here to stay. I know with our team at United Way, we just did a staff poll, and the thing that bubbled to the top from almost everyone who answered our survey was that they like the flexible schedules and they like the focus on family. I say a lot that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your family. And if you're not taking care of your family, your chance of putting in a high work product at your time at work is not good, because you're going to be worried about other things. You're not going to be as healthy as you can be, and that linkage between productivity, health, wellness, and specifically mental health, as Bessie was talking about. I think those things are here to stay. I hope they're here to stay. I know from our organization, they're here to stay, but I think those things will be pervasive across the workforce and across organizations, because it's just going to be demanded by those that are in the workforce, and it's going to the data is going to bear out that those things are really, really good for productivity.
I think you're right. Awesome. Thank you for that.
I'll dive in and be quite quick. I tell you, I agree with Ben, but I'll tell you what I hope sticks around is a level of fearlessness and in terms of innovation and partnerships. And it seems strange to talk about fearlessness when obviously fear has been a big component of our lives for the last year. But that old adage of, don't waste a good crisis, right? You see opportunities during times of stress that you don't normally see. And I've seen organizations approach the way they do business very differently. And frankly, some of it has come from the partnerships. And I'll just say, I have found myself doing things because Ben talked me into them, and I'm better for having done them the way he suggested, right? So there's real ability to learn from others when we're all trying to figure out the best move together.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that innovation is here to stay. I think that from an employer-employee standpoint, I think that this flexible environment is here to stay. I think whether you love it or hate it, I think that our use of technology and Zoom and Teams, I think that that's here to stay as hybrid formats of how we engage. I think that it is pointed out that having or building an online community really matters, and it helps us reach more people, frankly. So again, I think that everything that was said is absolutely correct. And I think that there are those other few things that are here to stay as well. So we basically had 10 years of change in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly. No, you're exactly right. There's nothing like a crisis to sort of clear out the clutter and make you see like what you have to do to move forward, right? Sort of brings a lot of clarity. And I wouldn't wish this on us again, but it's been impressive to see how people have responded. Honestly.
Sure.
So thanks for all the things you pointed out. I'm sorry we're out of time for the panel. We could keep going, obviously, and I would love to. One thing I want to mention, it came up in chat, and this is just for anybody who wants to know and can pass this on. It says that Lower Chattahoochee Work Source has funds available to help college students affected by the pandemic. And if you didn't know that, and you can get the word out on that, that would be terrific. Panel, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking part in this. I think now we're supposed to turn this back over to Kristen for some closing remarks. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, excuse me while I get everyone straightened out here and move where they need to go. It takes a minute individually. I think we did have another question or two that we were not able to get answered. And I would just encourage you, if you did have any other questions, we are going to move into a breakout session for people who'd like to do a little bit of networking and ask some questions one-on-one with our speakers today. I encourage you to do that if you are able to. We would love to have you. I also, for those of you who are left, I'd like to ask you if you could let us know, and I'm going to launch this poll here on the screen while I'm talking, if you would be interested in hearing more from the individuals, the organizations, like those that were represented during our opening video in the future. If you are interested in having some time to ask them one-on-one questions and learn from them and what they've been able to do, I think we'd love to be able to facilitate that. I also want to give a special thanks to the members of SHRM Columbus who were able to join us today. We were very happy to have you with us. If you are interested in learning more about SHRM Columbus and membership in SHRM Columbus and you're not involved now, there is a link that I've just added to the chat box with some information online. And if you have any other questions you want to get with us about, you are welcome to email those to me. My email address is also in the chat box, and I will be happy to get those answered for you. As we close, like I said, we're going to have some time available for some virtual networking, and we would love for you to join us. We understand if you can't. The way that is going to work is I am going to add a link directly to that virtual networking session into the chat box now. And all you need to do is just click on that link to go directly to that session. You will see a button that asks you to leave this meeting and join the new meeting, but you will be able to do that seamlessly. So if you are interested in joining us, as I said, I encourage you to do that. I thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope to see you during our next event in May. We will be talking about maintaining the strength of your workforce. So thank you again, and I hope you'll join us, and we'll see you in the networking session.